Shalom. We're continuing learning Shmuel Beis. We're up to Perek Chaf Aleph. Now we are towards the end of Sefer Shmuel Beis. The last event we had learned is David had returned to Yerushalayim after the death of Avshalom, and David crushed the second rebellion after Avshalom of Sheva ben Bichri. So the rest of the Sefer, though, is Shalok Seder. We're now going to read about events that did not occur then, but that occurred many years earlier than David and Bathsheba. And this is an example of Ein Mukdam U'Meucher B'Torah, that Torah, and including Nevi'im and Kesuvim, do not always go in chronological order. So do not look at this event as after David's return to Yerushalayim. Rather, this was before Avshalom and even before David and Bathsheba. And the Pasuk tells us, at some point early in David's reign, and apparently it was early in David's reign, Vayi Ra'av b'mei David, there was an awful famine in Eretz Yisrael, Shalosh Shanim, for 3 years, Shana Acharei Shana, for 1 year, and 3 consecutive years. Vayivakesh David es Pnei Hashem, and David asked Hashem. This typically means through the prophetic medium of the Urim B'Tumim. What is the Avera? What can we do tshuva for? Vayomer Hashem. Now it's interesting. I mean, why did he wait 3 years? But again, presumably they were Isaac in tshuva, tefillah tzedakah, and normally you're not matriach the Urim V'Tumim or nevuah until you try to do whatever you're able to do. But at some point, he asked Hashem, through the Urim V'Tumim, Vayomer Hashem. This famine is not because of what you did. This famine is because of what Shaul did. El Shaul v'el Beis Hadamim. Because of Shaul and the bloodshed of Shaul, Al Asher Hamis Es HaGivonim, because he murdered the Givonim. Now you'll remember from the book of Yoshua that the Givonim, who came from the town of Givon near Yerushalayim, they in fact were Canaanites who disguised themselves in the days of Yoshua as having come from an Eretz Rechoka, and as a result Yehoshua and the Nesiim made a bris not to harm them, and when it was determined that they were Canaanites who were Chayav Misa, Yoshua could not break the bris. So they were safe, they would not be killed, but they were made a servant class to be chotfei eitzim, cutters of wood, and shoavei mayim, and drawers of water for the Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash. So many Givonim were working for the Kohanim in the city of Naiv. So Chazal actually say Shaul did not kill the Givonim. Shaul did kill the Kohanim in Naiv when they gave shelter and food to David. And as a result, either some Givonim were killed accidentally, or the Givonim lost their parnasa. So this is quite amazing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings a Rav, not because Shaul killed the Kohanim, but because Shaul deprived the Givonim of their parnasa. And Chazal tell us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to establish the idea that Yidden cannot be liars. You make a bris, you make a shavua, even if you make it to people who tricked you, and even if you make it to Rishonim, and even if you make it to lowlifes, people who are not regular citizens, people of the 7 nations. Because if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have simply let this go by, people would say, oh, that's because they're Givonim, they're minorities, they're Sheva Umais. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to show that even the lowest member of society must be protected, and our responsibilities towards them must be honored. Again, this has some political implications I don't want to get into, but this is what Chazal say. People understand the justice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the mishpat of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the tzedek of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that even the lowest classes of society are entitled to the dignity of being protected. And that is treated as if he murdered the Gevinim. And then you'll see an amazing finish to this story. Vayikra HaMelech LeGevinim. So the Melech summons the Gevinim that are still alive. V'yamar Aleim. And now it mentions HaGevinim lo mibnei Yisrael. The Gevinim are not Jewish. Ki Yisrael HaMoiri. They are from the Amorites, the Canaanites. Ubnei Yisrael in the days of Yoshua. Nishbu lahem. Made a shvuah to them. Vayavake Shaul lahakaisam. Now the pasuk says Shaul wanted to smite them. Bikanoso livnei Yisrael v'Yehuda. So again, lefi pshutai shel mikra, without the drasha of Chazal, the simple pasuk is saying that Shaul wanted to deliberately kill the Gevinim because he thought they were a security risk to the Jewish people. That is pshutai shel mikra, and some Mefarshim learn pshutai shel mikra. But remember, Chazal's drasha is that he never deliberately targeted the Gevinim. This was the indirect consequence of killing Noivir HaKehanim. So, the pasuk is emphasizing they were not Jewish, they were not Yidden. Vayomer David ala Gevinim. Again, he's speaking to the representatives of the Gevinim. Ma esel lachem uvama chaper. What can I do to make it up to you? How can I do tshuva for Am Yisrael? How can there be a kapara that you will give us a bracha? By being masalek your tarumais. Vayimru lo haGevinim. And the Gevinim said, Ein lanu kesef v'zavim sholvam. So we don't want gold and silver from Shaul. Ein lanu ish lahamis b'Yisrael. And we don't want other Jewish people to die. Meaning we don't want Shaul's money, and we don't want other people's death. Vayomer. So David says, whatever you ask of me, I will do. Vayimru el hamelech, ha'ish asher kilanu, the man who wanted to destroy us, who of course is not alive anymore. Vasher dima lanu, that thought about eradicating us. Nishmadnu misyatzev b'chol gavoy, so that we would be destroyed and could not have a place among the Israelites. This is what we want. We don't want your people to die. But yutan lanu shiva anashim ibanav. 7 descendants of Shaul. Give them to us. Hokanum lashem b'givat Shaul b'chir Hashem. And we want them to be hung up, killed, precisely in the hill of Shaul, in Shaul's ancestral home. And they even acknowledge Shaul is the Bechir Hashem. Very, very strange. Shaul is the one that God chose, but we want his 7 descendants to be executed and strung up. Vayemer HaMelech, Ani Aten. Now obviously, this is not al pi halacha, because obviously you don't kill children because of any ritzicha that their ancestor did. Lo yumsu avais al banim, ubanim lo yumsu al avais. But this was a one-time hayras shal pi nevuah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through nevuah, said to do this, to establish the idea of chilul Hashem, when Yidden renege on their commitments and on their promises. So David now has the job of choosing 7 descendants of Shaul to be killed. And it mentions that they walked by the Aron HaKodesh, and the Aron kind of took in the ones that would be Chayav Misa. Vayachmael HaMelech al Mephibosheth ben Yonasan ben Shaul. The king did have special mercy on Mephibosheth, who is the lame son of Yonasan ben Shaul, al Shvuas Hashem asher ben Isam, ben David uven Yonasan ben Shaul, because of the special oath of friendship. So Mephibosheth was excluded. So who did the Melech take? And again, this was al pi Navi. Vayikach HaMelech eshnei bnei Ritzvah basaya. So Ritzvah basaya was one of Shaul's pilakshim. So there were the 2 children of Ritzvah basaya. One was Armoni, and one was Mephibosheth, another Mephibosheth. And then the other 5 This is going to be very difficult. Es chameshes b'nei Michal bas Shaul asher yolda liadriel ben Barzilai hamachaylasi. 5 children of Michal bat Shaul that she had from a man called Adriel ben Barzilai. Now, here is the following problem. Number 1, Michal bat Shaul was never married to a guy called Adriel ben Barzilai. Number 2, Michal bat Shaul did not have 5 children. Either she died without any children or she died in childbirth with 1 child that she had. So how could we talk about 5 children? And number 3, Michal was David's wife, so B'dafka, why would he pick those children? So Chazal tell us the following. If you remember the names, again, it's hard to remember all the names, Michal had a sister, Meirav. And Meirav is the one that was married to Adriel ben Barzilai. This is not Barzilai Giladi. Adriel ben Barzilai from Mechola. And therefore, the 5 children are not Michal's children. The 5 children are Meirav's children. But Meirav died young, and Michal raised the 5 children that Meirav had from Adriel. And she's treated as their mother, so still it's a very, very painful idea, because Michal was David's wife, so I'm assuming if Michal raised these children, they were raised in David's home. I don't know. And yet, these were the 5, plus Ritzvah Basaya, that were killed. Vayitneim biyada givainim. And these 7 children, we don't know how old they were, maybe they were Gedolim already, were given to the Givainim. Vayokiyim, and the Givainim, so it's not sure the Givainim executed them. The Givainim hung them up, Bahar, on a mountain, Lifnei Hashem. Vayiplu shivatam yachad, all 7 died at the same time. Vehema humsu, and they were killed, bimei kitzir, Barishainim Techilas Ketzir Sarim, at the beginning of the barley harvest around Nisan, Pesach time, the beginning of the spring, the end of the winter. There is no rain. Chazal say, by the way, that even though technically the Givainim underwent a conversion, but when the pasuk says they're not Mibnei Yisrael, actually halachically they may have become Jewish. But it means that as a result of this Maisa, it was seen that a Yid has 3 Milas. Rachmanim, compassionate. Baishanim, humble. Gaimlei chasadim, people who love chesed. The Givainim had cruelty and arrogance. And therefore it is not ra'oi that a Jew should marry a Givaini, even if the Givaini was technically Jewish. And therefore, according to one opinion in the Gemara, it was from this Maisa that David HaMelech was geyser through the Sanhedrin, that the Givainim are Pesulei Kahal, and that is what the Mishnah refers to them as Nesinim, that you're not allowed to marry in Nesin. According to one opinion in the Gemara, Nesinim, David Gazer Aleim, because of this Maisa, that they were the opposite of Rachmanim, Baishanim, and Gaimlei Chasadim. Now, be it as it may, the bodies were left by the Givainim to decompose in the hot sun of Nisan and Iyar. So now we have a sad narrative. Vatikach Ritzvah Basaya, right, 2 of her children and 5 of Meirav's children. She took a sack, Vatateu la el atzor, and she covered the rock in which the bodies were decomposing. Mitchilas kotzir ad nitach amayim aleim min hashamayim. And she covered up the bodies from the beginning of the harvest, which is Nisan, until water began to fall in Cheshvan, 7 months. And she remained with the bodies day and night. She remained there. She slept there. V'lo nasna aifa shamayim lanuach aleim yaimam v'eschayas hasadeh laila. And she did not allow the vultures to attack these bodies in the day. That's when the birds would fly. And the wild animals who come out at night. And she remained there for 7 months. Vayugad leDavid eis asher asasa Ritzvah basaya pileges Shaul. And when David heard what Ritzvah basaya, who was only a pileges of Shaul, did, vayelech David. Now, as I say, this is at the beginning of David's reign, not chronologically at the end of it. Vayikach es atzmai shov es atzmai Yonasan b'nai miyes bala yavish Gilad. Now remember that Shaul and Yonasan had been killed by the Pelishtim, and the people of Anshe Yavesh Gilad had kidnapped the bodies, and they had kept it in Yavesh Gilad. Asher ganvu osam yerchov Beit Shan asher talum shama Pelishtim b'yom hakos Pelishtim eshol b'golbaya. And now David is deciding to bury all of Shaul's family in places of honor, Givat Shaul. Now, we already were told that David had buried Shaul, but now we're giving the details that this is after the Ma'aser with the Gevanim. That's a raya that this happened much, much earlier, at the beginning of David's reign. V'yal misham, David reclaimed from Yavesh Gilad Atzmai Shaul, the bones of Shaul, the bones of Yonasan. Vayasfu es Atzmai Samukam, and now the 7 bodies of the ones that were hung up. The 5 children of the 2 children of Ritzvah Basaya, and the 5 children of Meirav that Michal had raised. Vayikbaru es Atzmai Shaul v'Yonasan b'nai b'Eretz Binyamin, and they were buried in the land of Binyamin, B'tzela, B'kera Kishaviv, in the plot of Kish, that was Shaul's father. Vayasu kol asher tziva hamelech, and all of the king's orders were carried out. And now that the Gevainim had their nekama, vayayoser Elokim la'aretz acharei chen, Hashem listened to the prayers of the Yidden of Eretz Yisrael, and Baruch Hashem, reign came. Again, it's clear this is the very beginning of David's reign, when he buried Shaul and Yonasan. And now we discuss wars that David fought. Vatihi od Muhammad la Plishtim es Yisrael, that as was often the case during David's reign, there was a war with the Plishtim. Vayere David v'avadav imai v'yilachamu as Plishtim v'yavdav. Now this is the beginning of David's reign, when David would actually go out and fight with his army. And David became very exhausted and physically tired. And the pasuk is going to discuss 4 Philistine giants, other than the Goliath, other than the Goliath that David had killed before he was Melech. And all 4 of these giants are brothers, and they are called Yelidei, the children of Rapha. So what is Rapha? That's Reish Pei Hey. Some say Rapha is the same as Rapha with an aleph, which means Rephaim, meaning they were the children of an even more famous giant called Rapha, the big giant. Or some say that Harapha is Orpah, that these were the giants that were the children of Orpah. So it's interesting that David, who comes from Rus, will defeat the children of Orpah, the sister of Rus, who refused to go with Naomi. And we describe 4 giants. Now again, this is not going to include Goliath, who was a 5th giant, because Goliath was killed by David before David became king. And the first of the 4 giants is a fellow, Yishbi Benaiv, that's his name. Asher B'Yelidei Harafa, he was one of the children of the giant, or the children of Orpah. Umishkal Kinai Shalosh Meos Mishkal Necheshes, he was so big and strong that the weight of his helmet was 300 shkalim, that's a weight, of copper. V'hu chagor chadash, and he was wearing a new belt, which held a big sword. Vayomer lahakaises David, and he was going to kill David. Vayazalo Avishai ben Tzeruya, but Avishai protected David. Vayaches Aplishti, and he smote Yishvi Benaiv. Now, it could be that Yishvi Benaiv wanted to kill David because David had killed his own brother, Goliath. And Avishai killed Yishvi Benaiv. Now, David was weak. He was tired. That's why he was vulnerable. So, Az Nishbu Anshe David Loy Lemar. And from that time forward, David's men made a shavua. You will not go in the army with us anymore because they'll try to get you. Lo seitze oid itanu lemilchama. We will not allow you to go out with us in war. V'lo techabe esner Yisrael, because you will then be extinguishing. You will be extinguishing the Ner Yisrael, because you are the light, you are the candle of Am Yisrael. We cannot allow you to put your life at risk. So that's giant number one. Giant number two, V'yarecheichei v'tiyayid melchama b'Gaiv. Gaiv is a city in Plishtim. Az hika Sivchai HaChushasi. This is one of David's soldiers. Sivchai, from Chusha, smote, Saf. Right, so there's Yishvi Benaiv. The second one is Saf. That's a name. Asher B'Yelidei Harafa. Again, the children of the giant or the child of Orpah. And then a third giant. So each one is a different hero. Yishvi Benaiv was killed by Avishai. Saf was killed by Sivchai HaChushasi. V'tiyayda melchama b'Gaiv in Pelishtim. V'yach Elchanan ben Yarei Orgim. So this is a long name. Yarei Orgim literally means the forest of the weavers. But that was his father's name. Beis Halachmi from Beis Lechem. Now this is very schwer. The third giant is called Goliath Hagiti. Goliath from Gas. Now, the problem is this can't be the famous Goliath, because the famous Goliath was killed by David. So some Meforshim say this was another Goliath. Or some say Es Goliath just means a brother of Goliath. And we're not given his name, which is very, very schwer, because all of these giants are brothers of Goliath, and if we give their names, why don't I give this name? So the pashtus is this is another Goliath, but again, it's a little schwer that two brothers had the same name. And it mentions that this Goliath was also a giant, Eitz Chaniso. The wood of his spear, Kimnor or Gim, was like the beam on a loom, a big wooden beam. And Elchanan ben Yari killed him. And then the final one, there's a fourth giant, V'tiyayid melchama b'Gas, another war in Gas, Vayhi ish madain. There was a man of great military prowess. Again, we're not given his name. I don't know why. Why not? And he had an unusual feature about him. Etzbos yadav, etzbos raglav, sheish v'sheish esrim v'arba. He had 6 fingers and 6 toes. So he had 12 fingers and 12 toes, a total of 24 digits. V'gam hu yulad laharafa, v'yacharef es Yisrael, and he blasphemed and made fun of the Jews. V'yakeyu Yahainasan ben Shima achi David, and he was smitten by Yainasan, the son of Shema, who was the brother of David. So this was David's nephew. Es arbas eila yuldu laharafa bagas. These 4 giants were born to Rapha. So Rapha either means supergiant or it means Orpah in the town of Gas. Vayiplu biyad David ubiyad avadav. And they were defeated. Again, this was early in David's reign. This was not at this particular point. But it mentions the fact that these giants, again, there are only 4 people, but these giants inspired terror in Am Yisrael. And psychologically, it scared the people. And by showing that they could be defeated by David and his men, that gave the Yidden confidence to realize that their nitzachon was biyad Hashem.